All right, everybody, this is our demo of No Retreat, the Invasion of Crete, which is the kind of the smaller bonus game that comes with No Retreat, the North African Front game, as published by GMT Games. We did a demo of No Retreat, the Russian campaign. We did that one last year, and I believe we also did one using Victory Point Games version of the North African game last year. And so this time around, I thought we would take a look here at No Retreat, the Invasion of Crete. And it's a smaller game, like I said, that comes with the North African game. The North African game comes with 3 map boards inside it. All 3 of them are mounted. It's a very heavy package. There's quite a bit in there. Nice thick counters, big, thick rounded counters. And on the surface, it looks like a very simple little game. And that's perhaps a little misleading. There's a lot going on in these games. And in fact, I think the North African front game is more complex than the Russian one is. And the little bonus game that comes with it shouldn't be approached as though it's perhaps a simple or quick or even an easy way to learn the system. The rulebook kind of says this might be a good one to train and learn the system. I would disagree because the way the rulebook is organized is all the rules you need to play the North African campaign are in the first segment of the rulebook. The final segment of the rulebook then revisits those segments and shows you the special rules that pertain to Crete. But there are so many differences between the two games, between North Africa and Crete, that it almost needs its own rulebook. So that's my only little quibble with it is it's slated as though it's an easier way to learn the system, and I don't think so. I think you're better off learning the North African game and then moving down to the Crete game. Two different, completely different gaming experiences. There's a similarity in feel, but there's a lot of differences between North Africa and Crete. So here's the objective of the game. You have the Allied side, which has just a hodgepodge of Commonwealth troops from Britain, New Zealand, and whatnot, some Australian troops. You also have some Greek units involved on the Allied side. On the Axis side, you have German paratroopers, and you have mountain troops, engineers, and I think an armored car unit. The invasion has to begin with paratroopers landing on the island, and the goal of the game is for the Axis player to capture as many Allied objective hexes as possible before the end of the game. For the Allied side, your goal is to deny that to the Germans and or evacuate your troops safely off to the south using the roads on the various little mini-maps. You can see the objective hexes on the different maps have a little red star on them, so that's how you can identify them. I believe there's a total of 11, and like I said, your goal is to, as the Allies, is to control as many of those as possible. The game board, I should say, is divided up into a number of mini-maps called sectors, and if you click on the button on the toolbar, it says areas. If you click that button, you'll see how the different maps actually fit into the island of Crete. The island of Crete is a very narrow but long and wide island. So this is how it's portrayed in the game. You can move between the maps using little sector arrows, and that's how you can connect between the little mini maps. So there are a total of 5 sectors: Melemi, Galatas, Canea, Rethman, and Heraklion, and probably butchering those names, but there you go. That's what it is. A couple of the key things that the Germans are going to want to go after early in the game is they're going to want to go after ports and airfields. As the British, you really don't, or the Allies rather, you really don't want to lose your ports because there's some sudden death victory goals that can happen midway through the game, and so you want to hold on to those ports as long as possible. Also, the hand size for the Allies is diminished by 1. Both players have a hand size of 4 throughout the game, but the British, or the Allied side rather, will lose 1 to their hand size if they lose a port at some time in the game. And that can be, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually, over time, it's going to turn out to be a pretty important loss to you if you lose a port. The other thing is airfields. the German Fallschirmjägers are probably going to get chopped up a little bit on their initial landings and the early combats. But eventually, if they can get an airfield, they can be reinforced very quickly, and the Allied side is going to be overwhelmed. But if you can keep them out of the airfields as the Allies, you can win an early victory. And in the long game, the longer you keep them out of an airfield and deny an airfield to the Axis, the better off you're going to be. All right, so that is the nuts and bolts of the goals of the game. The map, as you can see, you've got clear open terrain, mostly around the coast. Let me find a marker here I can move around to kind of show this. I'm going to use a no supply. Rather, I'm going to use an axis control marker here. You see that's clear terrain there. You've got, I believe it's called rough terrain. Rough terrain doesn't really do, it's not a whole lot of difference between that and beach. I call beach clear, it's really called beach. Then you have hills, which are good defensive terrain, and then you have these rugged mountains, which are very good defensive terrain. You have orchards, which are nasty. If you're landing as a paratrooper on the ground, they benefit the defense. You also have little towns. The towns show the little buildings as a narrow strip of buildings following a road. So those are how you differentiate towns from city hexes, like Canea and Galatas. Those are cities. Suda is a city, and so forth. So there is the nuts and bolts of the terrain. So without further ado, I think we'll just go ahead and start throwing some counters around and see where that takes us. I think I just discovered that this piece can't be deleted. How about that? All right, let me see if I can get rid of it this way. There we go. Okay, so the sequence of play with the Crete game is simpler than the one that you have with the North African game, which is, I don't want to say convoluted, but let's just say involved. The one with Crete is a lot more like the Russian front, where it's less involved than the one for North Africa. The first thing you always do is advance a turn marker. There's a number of checks that take place for victory, but that's only done on certain turns. On the turn track, if you look at the player mat button on the toolbar, it'll show you the turn track, and it's the turns that have the little skull and bones next to the turn number. Those are the ones that are going to involve those sudden death checks. Let's see, after the checks, you're going to note the new game turn event, which is the one thing I hate most about the system. I really think that this could work better if the events, the game turn events, were cards or were listed out detailed on a player aid, so you don't have to keep flipping through the rule book to find out what the events are. I mean, once you played 10 or 12 times, you remember them, but, you know, let's face it, not many of us get to play it that many times. So that's one of the things we're going to go ahead and do right now is we're going to look at the turn track, and it says we're on turn 1. Big shock there. And if we look at the rule book on page 36, it shows you the new game turn event segment. I swear I'm going to make some kind of a better play aid for C3I or something, because it's a really cool game. It's just I hate doing this part of it. And it says on turns 1, 2, and 4, there are German paratrops. Also, turn 1, there are limited moves for the Allies. Allied players can't use regular movement or target markers. All right, so that's some of the special conditions that are going to pertain throughout this turn. All right, so with that done, we move on to the next thing, which is to adjust our cards. So we'll go ahead and fill up our hands. And I'm logged in as a solitaire player, so I'm going to have access to this, but I'm going to try to throw the cards down so that you guys can see them too. And if you're watching by video, it'll also be, you'll be able to see what's on my screen. So the hand size is 4 for both players. The Axis hand size will be increased by 1 when they gain control of an airfield. So yet one more reason to try to hold on to those airfields. All right, so, and as you draw, there are certain cards that when you draw them, you have to play them right away. For example, Operation Mercure tells you right there that you must play it immediately upon drawing it. Let me double check the scenario instructions because I don't think that applies on the turn 1, but let me just check. Okay, I am looking, and I don't see any exception to this. So I think it is going to go ahead and get played, and so they're going to start off turn down. It says reshuffle a deck and discard pile together, form a new draw pile. Afterwards, draw 2 cards for this one if you've captured 1 airfield. Tough luck for us. So basically, instead of having our hand increased by 1, we have it decreased by 1. So let me go ahead and throw that back into the draw pile and draw again. Oh my goodness. Alright, so you must play this one immediately upon drawing it. Reduce your hand size by 1 this turn. Okay, so that was fun. Put 1 German detachment from the reserve box on 1 German unit not in an EZOC. Well, they're not even on the map yet, so that sucks. And there we go. Alright, so the Germans start off with a very, very horrible opening hand. But sometimes that's just the way things roll. Okay, so both hands have been drawn, nothing really of note early on. Next thing I'm going to do is go into the next phase here. Hang on a second here, I got the wrong play 8 in front of me. It is a strategic phase, which is going to be, I believe, skipped. No. Something gets skipped on turn 1 here, and I can never remember if it's that one or the organizational phase. Hang on just a sec here. Make sure I get this right. All right. Well, technically, I suppose, hang on, let me back things up a little bit here. I guess, according to the setup instructions, I really should have set up my boys that are going to be airdropping this turn. Should have done that earlier. So let me go ahead and do that now real quick. You can't land on mountain. If you drift into mountain, you're okay, kind of, but you can't pre-position them there. What you have to do is you have to pre-position your square units on either beach terrain or hills or on the rough terrain. You can put them on villages, you can put them on orchards, but it's best if you remember that the wind conditions are coming up from the south, and you're going to tend to drift north and to the east. You also want to note the positioning of allied units. Presently, all of the allied units are hidden on the box display. And the box's display can be accessed with a button on the toolbar. I believe that's private information for the allies, so I don't think any of you guys can access it. But that shows what's what. And all of the box counters are flipped over to hide their identities. I want to say there's 4 of them. 4 or 5 of those are actual dummies and not real defensive positions. But what they do is they conceal allied units either in their hex or in the 6 surrounding hexes. So as the Germans, I want to consider that very carefully. And I want to go after the Malimi airfield real bad. So we're going to go ahead and drop like so with those guys. I prefer to drop a little bit of ways from those airfields because you get shot to pieces if you get too close. And we'll put this guy right in here. And the Sturm gliders I can afford to get a little bit more aggressive with. And we'll go ahead and drop those guys right there. Okay, and now the next group that's going to drop on turn 1 is actually this group here that I'm moving the pieces around for. And they can drop either in Galatas or Kania. The advantage of dropping in the Galatas sector is that there are victory point spaces in there, but what's of immediate concern is grabbing a port and or an airfield. And if you drop in Galatas, you might be able to support the assault on the Malimi airfield. But I think it is more lucrative perhaps to go after either Kania or Suda. So I think that's what we're going to go ahead and try here. So let's go ahead and drop like so. And we got a couple round tokens that we're going to throw down. The round tokens are units, but they're called detachments. They're called detachments. They have limited movement ability. Their only rating on the counter themselves is a combat rating. So, and I'll talk about what those are in just a moment. But for now, during the air landing, everybody's got to be stacked individually. So that's all the boys that are going to drop here on turn 1. There is 2 more landings that are going to happen on turn 2 in the Rethmanon sector and Heraklion sector. That's where those 2 drops are going to take place. And so I have the guys that are going to drop there pre-positioned in the holding boxes for those sectors. Okay, so the other thing I need to do for the setup is there is barrage counters in this game, unlike any of the other games, and that's like what you see here. There's a barrage counter here for the German Fallschirmjäger engineer that you see right here. So he's got his own barrage counter that can be used to support combats, but you don't get use of it on turn 1. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is open up the player mat, and it gets to go in the used unit holding box. So we just chuck him in there for now. The allies start with a barrage counter in each of their sectors except Canea. Basically, you get a barrage counter on following turns. You'll get a barrage counter in any sector that has a box counter with a combat strength of 2. So in the Canea sector, what I did instead is I placed the 1 allied tank support unit, which can function in a number of ways like a barrage counter. It can help you either offensively or defensively in combat. Okay, German player places all his guys on the board. Allied player places his guys on the board. And I don't think we do a strategic phase on turn 1. It does not say what to do, and all of a sudden I can't remember if we do or not. I do know that, I think you skip all that stuff on turn 1. Let me double check. Okay, I think that's all skipped. I think I should not have actually drawn cards on this opening turn. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just discard them all because I think I jumped the gun on that. Jeez, I've played this so many times and I keep screwing up this opening part. Okay. Go ahead and reshuffle. I get it mixed up because things are so different in the North African game where you start with cards in your hand. I don't believe you do here. Now it goes, ordinarily the airdrops take place during the organizational phase. And so what the setup instructions tell me to do is do the airdrops now and then proceed with the allied player turn, and then it'll be the Axis player turn and so forth. So here we go. The landings. What I'm going to do is clear the movements so that we can see who drops and who doesn't. It's up to the German player the order in which he resolves these. And to resolve them, what you're going to want to do on your end is use the button on the toolbar. It says Tables. And we're going to start with the Malimi sector. And we'll start with the glider battalion. And we're going to be landing that guy first. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the paradrop table on that the tables window that you opened up. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the scatter pattern. Now, square counters are going to scatter, assuming they don't land in their drop, their pre-designated drop hex. Assuming they're not going to drop there, they're going to land actually on a vertex between 3 hexes. And then you get to choose which of the 3 hexes it actually lands in. So you get a little bit more flexibility with them. Round tokens, on the other hand, the detachments that we dropped over in the Canea sector, they're going to land in a hex. They don't drop on a vertex, and according to the scatter pattern, that is the actual hex that they drop in. There's a number of modifiers that are going to apply to this, but before we do any of the drops, it's at this point that we reveal the hidden boxes in the sectors, the maps that are active. Now, right now on turn 1, the Rethmanon and Heraklion map sectors are not active. Only the Canea, Galatas, and Malimi are active. So we're going to go ahead and reveal those tokens, all the counters that are hidden by the box tokens. One last thing, I should have put down the air units. The German player has all of these Stuka air units that he can use to support or hinder movement. If you want to hinder movement of the allies, during the setup, you can put it into an interdiction space. Okay, and hang on a second here. I'll get to this in just a second. Carl is saying you don't discard your cards on the first turn. The players do have a full hand of cards. Okay. All right. Well, we'll reset that then. I couldn't remember, and I couldn't see anything in the setup information that confirmed it one way or the other. So let me go ahead and draw those back up. Start with the allies again. 2, 3, 4. Nothing of note. Germans. Actually, I drew the perfect hand for this operation. Okay, well, all right, screwed up a couple things, but I'm allowed a few screw-ups on these demos. All right. Okay, Carl, real quick, well, as long as you're here, I'm glad you're here. Do we do a strategic phase here in on the first turn, or is that skipped? I'm just not seeing it. While I wait for him to do that, I'll just explain that these Stuka counters, they can be placed either in an interdiction space or in a sector holding box where they can be used to support combat in those sectors. So I'm going to drop everything in Kania and Malimi. So. Okay, now is that strategic phase before you actually do the drop, or, I mean, should we follow the sequence of play? Because the setup instruction seems to conflict with sequence of play. I mean, according to the sequence of play, the strat phase should go first. And I think that's what we should do, but I'm not 100% sure. While he's checking on that, I'll just go ahead and show you what we drew for the Axis side, because that's the cards I think that are going to be really useful here. One of them is applicable in the strat phase, and that's the ammo shortage card. We're going to look at the bottom sector of the card. This is the hand for the Axis side. So you're looking at the bottom portion. The top portion is ignored. Pinpoint drop, that's going to be used during the para drop. And Kurt Student is also something that can be used in the strat phase to para drop around attachment within 2x as a friendly unit. I think that can apply to give us an extra detachment here on the opening turn. And Fallschirmjäger's Spirit is something that's used defensively. It's more or less like a combat type card against paratrooper or glider units. So that's what we drew into the Axis hand. Show you what we got here for the Allied hand. Scratch Troops is a nice strat phase card. It puts two, again, we're looking at the top portion now, not the bottom. Okay, it looks like we are going to skip that strat phase here, but I'll show you the rest of these cards anywho's. German Snafu is a great card. For the Allies, it cancels out a just played German card. And then you've got Bofors AA guns. This is going to make the initial landing kind of interesting. Play during the battle sequence to abort German air support unit that is on the map, or play to add +2 modifier to landing a die roll of a paratroop unit. So that's the one that's going to be real interesting there. Cretan Irregulars is something that's more helpful, I think, later on once some Greeks have died and there's some Greek counters in the Greeks box on the player mat window. There aren't any right now, so that event's really not useful for the Allies. But the rest of them are actually useful events. Okay, so we're skipping all the strat phase stuff, and now we're ready to land. But now that we have our air units, our Stukas pre-positioned in the holding boxes, I don't want to throw one down on the interdiction box of Galatas, so I'm actually going to go ahead and put him in Kania. And now, once all that's done, I'm actually going to reveal the counter at Malimi is not a dummy. It is a box. On Galatas, we have a dummy and a real. And over there at the city of Galatas, another real with the strength of 2. In Canea, we have 2 small real boxes, defensive positions. Okay, so now for the one over by Malimi, box B as in Bravo. This is what was hidden in those spaces. We have some Maoris, a bunch of New Zealand troops, and a detachment. So that's what was located there. In J, Carl, while I've got you handy, this is another question I was thinking about earlier. All of a sudden, I didn't know the answer to this, but are the boxes considered British units or Allied units that the Greeks cannot stack with? Now, I've been playing that they could, but all of a sudden, I couldn't remember if they could or not. So, just curious about that one. So, box J has a reel in it, and it's a dummy, so it goes back to its holding box, but it was used to hide 2 Greek units. Okay, so over in Galatas, box number letter J was not real. It was a dummy, so we take it off the board, but it was used to hide a couple Greek units. So, okay, so I've been handling the Greeks a little bit wrong. So you cannot stack them with boxes. Good, because I played it safe for the demo, and I didn't do it here. I just used dummies to hide them. For A, we have a couple New Zealanders nearby. Over at G, there is only one guy in there. Excuse me, I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. That was H. G has a bunch of guys around it. There we go. And some detachments in the city behind them. Okay, C as in Charlie is used to hide a Greek and another British unit. Okay, so that is what has been hidden on these maps here. Oh, H. Forgot about H. That's the one that was hiding the New Zealand unit here is stacked in that city. That city should not be ignored, ladies and gentlemen, because if you lose an airfield, if you lose Malimi Airfield, you're going to need to evacuate some guys probably. And you're going to need that location to evacuate to the south. So that's a very strategic location. It's not a high priority for the Germans early on. And so they, it's not always that they're going to go after it, but it's something to be aware of. Whoops. Let's put him back there and then clear the movement. All right, we're ready to do some air landings here. So let's go with that Sturm unit up there. Now he is, whoops. The Sturm unit is got a special modifier. Again, we're going to look at the tables and the pair drop table. If you look at that, I'm going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier to read on the video. But if you look at the modifiers, you'll see that if the drop is made by a glider unit or if it is made by a medium bomber event card, there's a -3 modifier to it. -1 if the initial drop hex is not adjacent to enemy units. +1 for each anti-aircraft unit within 3 hexes of the guy that's dropping. In other words, the box counters are considered to house anti-aircraft. So if you're within 3 hexes of a box, there is a +1. If the initial drop hex is enemy occupied, there's a +1. If the initial drop hex is orchard, there's a +1. And if you ended up with a scattered drop on a previous attempt, there is a +3. So Sturm unit is going to drop, and looking at the Axis hand, I don't think you want to use pinpoint drop here. However, the Axis player doesn't know about the Allies' Bofor guns. So let's see here. Carl says, is that a real box or in Nia Alikianos? Yes, that is a real one. That was one of the free position ones during the setup. Look at the setup card. There's ones that's the only real one that is free to set up anywhere. All the rest of them have to be within 1 hex of the coast. So you can't just stick them everywhere. But I chose to put the real one there again because I feel that that's an important place to hold on to. Okay, so the Allies are going to play their Beaufort guns to kind of jack up this landing from the gliders. So that's going to be a +2 modifier. Looking at the tables, there is a -3 because it's gliders, -1 because it's not adjacent, +1 because it's within range of the AA guns. So that cancels out the -1. And so the net is going to be a -1 altogether to this drop. So here we go. 3 becomes a 2, and so it is going to land here on, the module doesn't allow vertex placement, but it's going to land in one of these 3 hexes. Now, once you've established the vertex, then you look at each of the 3 hexes that adjoin that vertex. I'm going to move my Ventrilo window over because I keep losing my mic button. Sorry. Okay, once you've established the vertex, you look at the 3 hexes. If any one of those 3 hexes contains water, open ocean, or if it contains an enemy unit, then the boys are going to take a hit, step loss, and they have to land in an empty hex, so if possible. And you don't want to land them in mountain, if at all possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to park those bad boys right there, and they don't take a hit. Okay, and that card is discarded. Now we'll go with the next Sturm unit, and we can take away that paradrop marker to show that they have landed. All right, we'll go ahead and go with this guy right here. So he is going to have a -1 because he's not adjacent to an enemy piece, and since he's not within 3 hexes of an AA, either in Malimi or in Nea Alikianos, we're going to go ahead and get a -1. And it becomes a 4, which is going to put him there in one of these 3 spots. And so we'll go ahead and drop him right there, right where he's at. So he's down safely without a loss. The 4 strength guy is going to get a +1 because he's within range of the AA, and a -1 because he's not adjacent to anybody. And he lands exactly where he's marked. The last guy in Malimi is going to have a -1, and he becomes a 3, which goes 2 up. Let's see, one of these 3 here. And so we'll go ahead and drop him close to the detachment, and he doesn't take a loss either. So he's down. All right, it'll probably get a little bit more violent over here in Canea because there's more enemy units to bump into. We'll do the square units first, and I believe that has to be done by rule. We'll go from right to left here. The 3rd Fallschirmjäger, first battalion there, is going to get a -1 +1. He's within range of AA because there's boxes both in Suda and just south of Canea, so it's going to be a straight-up die roll. 4, we'll put him in one of those 3. Now, because 2 of those 3 hexes contain an enemy unit, he is going to take a step loss, and he must land in the only empty space of the 3 possible. The engineers will be next, and same deals, just a straight-up roll. Rolls a 2, which will park him in one of these 3 hexes, and so we will drop him right there in the orchard, safe and sound. The engineers are very valuable too because they have the barrage counter that can be placed and used in any sector where the engineers are present. Okay, next battalion, the 5 strength battalion, rolls a 6, which is no good at all for him. That's going to put him up 1 over 1 It's going to be, looks like one of these 3 hexes here, which surprisingly enough is not enemy occupied. So how about that? Tell you what, we'll drop him right here to support his wounded comrade. How about that? Okay, last square counter. Rolls a 2, and that'll put him one of these 3. We'll leave him where he's at. Round counters, we'll do the guy in the south. He gets just a straight up roll for him. It's a 4, which is going to plop him down in that hex there. And then last detachment is going to roll a 1 and plop down right where he's at. Wait a second, 1 plus 1 because he's landing in an orchard. That's actually going to be a 2, and that's going to park him here. Sorry about that. I forgot his initial landing was actually orchard, so I'll park him there. And the landings are done. Okay, so now at this point, that would actually conclude the organizational phase, and then you go into the allied player movement, then allied player combat, and then the Axis player movement, Axis player combat, and that would constitute a turn. But let me explain for a moment here the counters really quickly, because you got these hexagonal counters, you got round counters, you got square counters. The hexagonal counters never move. And unlike the units from the North African game, they don't have multiple steps. They can only take 1 hit before they die. They're also sort of like terrain. They're a unit, but they're also a terrain type of sorts. And you'll find their information on the terrain effects chart on the player mat. They have no zone of control, but they do influence combat because if you attack a hex that contains a box, there's a defensive shift for the defender. The round counters are either detachments or Greeks. There is a difference between the two. Detachments are only allied units. They're going to be tan in color, like the guys up in Canea, and the one over by Milimi. Also, the Germans have tan counters as well. You'll notice that the German ones are two-tone. That's because the mountain division units for the Germans are gray, and gray units cannot stack with blue units, and blue units can't stack with gray units. Blue has to stack with blue, gray with gray, but the two-tone units can stack with either or. The round units typically also have their combat strength in parentheses. That's not always true. The Greek units, many of them are unparenthesized. If there's no parentheses, then that indicates that unit has a zone of control. So that means those Greek guys do have a zone of control around them, provided that their combat strength is not in parentheses. If the unit has parentheses, then it has no zone of control, and you can just scoot right on by it. If the combat strength is in white color, it may not participate in an attack. It may participate in a counterattack or a counter blow, but it may not participate in an attack, with one exception, and that is the detachments. Not Greeks, but detachments may participate in an attack even if they have a white strength in order to soak off losses. So their combat strength does not apply in the attack, but their presence is allowed in the attack. That way, if the attacker took a loss or something, then you could take it on the detachment rather than on the other unit. Okay, so that's pretty much the skinny on the units. Again, those the boxes, you'll notice their combat strength is white, which means they can counterattack and counter blow, but not participate in ordinary attacks. They also don't have a zone of control by themselves. So that's the long and the short of that. For stacking, you can stack 2 units together, whether they're round and or square. You can stick 1 square, 1 round, 2 squares, or 2 rounds. However, with this one special rule, and that is if you're stacking 2 square units together, they both have to be from the same parent unit. So what the parent unit is, if you look at the top of the counter, you see the unit designator. You want to look at the number on the left. The number on the left, to the left of the hash mark, if it's the same number, then they can stack together. So all those guys by Milimi belong to a New Zealand unit, and the number 5 to the left of the hash mark indicates they can stack with one another. However, I could not, for example, stack this New Zealand guy with this Welsh unit. So, because the Welsh unit you'll see has a CR designation to the left of the hash mark. So only the CR guys can stack next to each other. Also, don't be confused by the colors in the NATO symbols. That's actually, I think, to help you identify nationality, and it's not used to define formations. So, for example, the New Zealand guys all have like a green interior to the NATO symbol. I have one on the boxes display, but there's a guy that's going to show up over in the Heraklion sector with a whole bunch of tan guys, but he's got a blue NATO symbol, but the number to the left of the hash mark is the same as all the guys that have a tan NATO symbol. I don't know this for sure. Maybe Carl can confirm, but I think that the blue guys are all Australians. Last thing about the NATO symbols, you'll see some of these have double NATO symbols. For example, the New Zealand guy here that I'm just moving around, and pretty much all the German Fallschirmjägers except for the understrength guy here. All of the guys that have the double boxes NATO symbols are 3-step units, which means if they take a step loss, like the guy over by Suda did during the landing, then it can take one more step loss. And the square counter goes to the player mat and is replaced by a detachment that is being held on the player mat in the reserves box. Detachments, those round units, like you see up here in Canea, round units on the Allied side that are not Greeks are considered detachments, like I said earlier, but when they die, they never go to the destroyed box. They go back to the reserves box, and they're going to go face down when they arrive there. And the reason for that is you have to spend some resources in order to flip those guys back over so that they can come back into play again. So you can cycle these detachments in and out. That's pretty much it on the units here. So we can go ahead and push things around here. During the Allied movement phases on turn 1 and 2, the Allies are prohibited from moving ordinarily, and they don't get any. They can't use any of their markers, their target markers. In fact, I should really get these off the player mat and bring them down here. Both sides get 5 target markers, except that the Allies can't use any here on turn 1, so they can't attack us. They just kind of sit back and do nothing. Now, as the Germans, I got an interesting choice here. A couple things I can do. Once all of the movement is done, then there's a phase that takes place called defensive support phase. And what I can do in defensive support phase is I can take my Stuka markers and my barrage markers. Now, right now, I don't have any barrage markers available. I'll get one next turn for that engineer unit that landed, but I don't get them on the initial turn that he lands. Later on, when the mountain division arrives, there's a bunch of engineers, and so I'll have a bunch of barrage counters for the Germans. What I can do is, when it's the Allied player's turn, as the German player, after his movement's done, I can take my round tokens that are in these sector holding boxes, and I can plunk them down on things. One of the choices I can do is if I flip them over and plunk it down on a hex, that hex is considered neutralized, strafed, if you will. If I were to plunk one down, say on this hex here, basically it neutralizes the effects of the anti-aircraft from the box. So if I want to use any of my Stukas to support combats later on during my half of the turn, and I haven't neutralized that box, then I could lose those Stuka markers for a couple turns. They could end up going to the turn track and being out of play for a while. It's like a naughty kid going to timeout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend one of those right there to strafe that hex. That's, like I said, it's going to do one thing. It's going to neutralize the anti-aircraft from the box, but it's also going to hinder attacks from that hex. If the Allied player, let's just imagine for a moment that the Allied player was not prohibited from using target markers. If he could place them down and launch attacks, if you strafe a hex, or as the Allies, if you flip over one of your barrage counters to its pinned side and stick it on a hex that's occupied by an enemy unit, then any enemy unit that's attacking out of that hex, he's negatively impacted. There's a defensive shift involved if you attack out of a strafed or pinned hex. So I know they can't use their target markers, so I'm not going to strafe a bunch of stuff, but I will go ahead and strafe up here. And yes, that is on the TEC, so the terrain effects chart, so you can remember that. But it's easy to forget that after the allied player moves, that you don't go straight to combat like in all the other games. The other player gets an opportunity to lay some stuff down. And so the game is very, very interactive. I think it's perhaps even more interactive than the other games in the series. Although I can't speak to the France game. I haven't played the French one yet. Okay, so there we go. We've done everything we're going to do there for the defensive support segment. So now it's the allied player's turn to attack. He's going to put his target markers down, except that he can't on turn 1. So now, once the allied player has placed all the target markers down that he wishes or may place down, the other player, the inactive player, may use his limited supply of target markers to lay counter blows. Now, what a counter blow does is it forces the other guy to attack that hex. Why would you want the enemy to attack you? Well, because you can make him attack at really bad odds. For example, I could lay a counter blow down on this hex, and now that detachment there has got to attack the 3rd Sturm battalion there, or by Melimi. Now, when you lay a counter blow down, the opponents, they got to attack, even if they have white combat strength. But the terrain does not apply. So it's not going to be all roses, okay? But you force him to attack at negative odds, and what you're hoping for is a counterattack opportunity so that you can maybe get an early lick in on him. But once you use that target marker, it goes to the used box until the next turn. So I'm not going to have it during the axis half of the turn. So I want to be careful about that. Another place where I might think about putting one of these down would be over here by Suda, and forcing an attack on these guys here next to Suda. Now that'll set up an interesting situation, because the Greeks and allies may not attack together unless they have an event that stipulates otherwise. And like Carl says, counter blows are like spoiling counterattacks. So I think that's all we're going to go ahead and do here. So we'll go ahead and resolve these 2 attacks. So the allied player will attack over here by Melimi. They're going to attack 2 strength versus 6. We'll look at the allied hand. I don't remember that they had anything. No, I don't see anything that's going to help there. German player, look at their hand. I don't think they had anything off the top of their head that's going to help here. No. Okay, so they're going to attack at 1 to 3 odds. If the attack column is worse than 1 to 3 odds, then it's automatically a CA result, which is a counterattack. We'll go ahead and roll here using, and again, make sure you use the right CRT table. So it's the allied player making the attack, so he's got to roll on the 1 to 3 column. And he rolls 1, which is CA. Now, look at the die roll face on the CRT, and you'll see it's red. What that means is odd roll means air support aborted if there's any defensive AA. Well, there's no defensive AA, and I didn't use any of my Stukas, so that's not going to apply. But if I had used Stukas there, and if the AA had not been strafed, then I could have lost that Stuka counter for 2 turns. Okay, so a CA result is not a mandatory counterattack. I can choose not to, but in this case, I wanted that result, so I am going to go ahead and counterattack. But now the odds are recomputed, and the German player is attacking 6 to 3, so it's now 3 to 1 odds, and again, terrain is ignored during counterattacks and counter blows. So we're on the 3 to 1 column, but now maybe I want to plunk down one of these air units. So the attacker gets to place his stuff first, and so he'll go ahead and plunk one down there. And since I did not place a token on the interdiction box earlier on during the organizational phase, I could have placed a Stuka up here in the interdiction for Melimi. Had I done that, if he uses his artillery here, and I've interdicted, and if the combat result shows a green die face on the CRT, doesn't matter who's rolling or who's CRT, then that that combat marker is neutralized. The artillery is considered strafed, and it gets taken out of play for a couple turns. In this case, I don't know. It's probably overkill here. This is gonna the Stuka is gonna shift the column 1 to the right, and so we're gonna go ahead and not use the artillery just yet. And so that'll be a 4-to-1 odds. And die roll is a 2, and it was a good thing we used the Stukas because otherwise that would have been an exchange result. So a D means defender falls back, has to retreat 1 hex, or not retreat and lose a step. Since detachments are only 1-step units, he really does need to retreat. So he is going to fall back to here. He, I believe, could fall back into the hex that contains the Maoris that's being strafed, but I'm not going to do that just yet. And then since the hex has been evacuated, we can go ahead and move right on in. So there you have it. So that gets used. Last attack is over by Suda. Now this one here is also another interesting one. It's 3-4 attack strength to 9. So it's actually going to be on the 1 to 3 column. It's on the 1 to 3 column. Do you want to use the tanks just yet? No. Be on the 1 to 3 column. He rolls a die. It's 3, which is counterattack. Yeah, you know what? That'd probably be better odds to attack with that. In which case, yeah, you're right. That would be much better strategy. Let's go ahead and say that that's the case, because that actually shows you the rule. If we attacked with the Greek unit instead of the British in Suda, which is, as Carl points out, a much smarter strategy, in that case, it's going to be greater than 1 to 3 odds, so it's automatically a CA result. And so we'll go ahead and get the dice. It's 9 to 2, so that's what, 4 to 1, and we're not going to use any of our aircraft. And a 6, I think, is going to kill him dead. 4 to 1. DD result is going to destroy him until he is dead. So he is going to take a step loss, and I think he's got to retreat 3 hexes. Double checking. Retreat 3 hexes. Each defending unit loses 1 step. All right, so he's going to fall back 1, 2, 3, and lose a step. So now he becomes basically a irregular unit, partisans, which means he has no zone of control, he has no combat rating, and if you attack him, you look on the CRT and there's a column that says IRC on the far right-hand side, and so that's how you attack them or attack with them. Any counterattack involving partisans is done on the IRC column of the Allied table. We could advance. That might be worthwhile doing, actually. So we'll advance a guy up there. Now we're kind of flanking Kania. So there you go. Go ahead and clear the movement out. And I'll pause for just a moment, just in case. Okay, let's go ahead and continue here. It's now the Allied player turn, and the movement is going to be real simple. The movement cost to move in the mountains is just really cost prohibitive. So if you're trying to set up, you know, nice 3-on-1 attacks, that kind of thing, it's really hard to maneuver in the face of the enemy when you've got mountains. You can't move Zoc to Zoc in this game, like in some of the other games. There are some provisions for moving from zone of control to zone of control. This game, you have no ability to do that unless there is an event that stipulates otherwise. I can't remember. I think there might be. I think there's maybe a night infiltration one or something like that allows you to do that. So what we're going to go ahead and do is leave the 2 guys that are closest to Malimi right where they're at. Let's go ahead and take this guy up the road. That's going to be half a movement point, and then, boy, I'd sure like to get a flank attack up there, but I think I'll go ahead and stack him with him. And the other guy's going to move up the road half, and then there. I'd like to get him stacked with that Sturm unit, but he doesn't have enough movement points to do that, so that's just going to have to do. Round units have no movement rating. They can't move normally. They move by use of counterblow tokens during the other player's movement phase, or the other player's combat phase. So that's when I could have used a counterblow token to move one of my round units or by Cania during the allied player's turn, but I didn't want to spend a counterblow token for that purpose. The other way you can move round tokens is if you have them stacked with a square unit that is allowed to move. So what we'll go ahead and do here is we'll do some repositioning. We'll take these engineers up the hill for 2 and then down for half, expending pretty much all their movement to do that. And what that'll do for me is that will that'll at least get them set up to join in the attack with the. So I've got a consistent line here. Trying to make up my mind if I want to go all out for Suda or try to flank Cania. I don't have enough movement points to flank Cania because it would take me 3 movement points to get up the hill, and that's it. And chances are he's going to use a counter blow. If I'd strafed in Cania, then he wouldn't be able to use counter blow tokens to move, but he's going to be able to move into Cania with a counter blow token. So, yeah, I'm not going to get good odds on it. So I'm going to leave him right where he's at. And the other guy is going to go 1, 2, and he can, I believe, pick up the round guy with him and move down for 3. And that's it for our movement. Defensive time. We will go ahead and we will use the tank counter as the allies to pin that particular hex. The tanks are going to pin that unit there. And again, you can only use those defensive tokens in the sector in which they're pre-positioned, either during setup or during the organizational phase. And yes, you can move the square, just like in No Retreat when you can use your mech guys with counter blows. You can use all your square guys. Pretty much all your units can move 2 hexes, irregardless of terrain, using counter blow tokens, provided that they are not in a sector being interdicted. But I didn't use any of my Stukas for interdiction, so that may have been foolish. We'll have to see. Over in Melimi, we will go ahead and we will use our artillery on those guys. Nobody in Galatas, so there's no need to use that guy, so that's it. Now it's combat time, and we have 3 target markers. Let's target him. And let's target him. I don't know. Let's go ahead and target the detachment. Maybe we can kill it. I don't know. All right, so no, there's no interdiction. I didn't use any of my Stukas, perhaps unwisely. Hadn't used any of my Stukas for interdiction purposes. So all these tokens here can be used. Flip them all over to their counterblow side to move guys around, provided they are not in an enemy zone of control. So of these, the guy up in the Melimi airfield could move into a zone of control. He's not in one now, so I can give him a counter blow, and I can make him go like bing, bing. Wait a minute. Can you do that into a target? I can't remember off the top of my head, Carl. I think he might not be able to move where a target is. That's right. You can't reinforce where there's a target, but you can move somewhere else. I think it might be worthwhile to put them like Jack and Jill go up the hill. So we'll go ahead and stick him up the hill there for now. And then once you've moved, then the counter blow goes away. So it doesn't, you're not compelled to attack that. I think we'll go ahead and put a counter blow on this hex here so that it breaks up the German attack. The Germans were really ganging up on the CR RNG unit or by Cania. And so now they're compelled to attack the hex that's got the box. Now, of course, the box and the orchard terrain is not going to help at all, but it breaks up the attack a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and start getting these guys moved around too. Yeah, I think like Carl suggests, that's a good move. Move him over there. Just try to, you want to really just keep the Germans confined. Don't give them a lot of room to maneuver. And then maybe some of these Greeks. Get him over there. That'll make it harder for those guys to, because you can't move from Zok to Zok, so now that Sturm guy can't circle around to the beach. Whoops, and we'll send that other Greek guy up there with the counterblow marker. Okay, that's it. Now the attacks. We'll do the guys over by Malimi. We got 10 factors against that detachment. So it's a 5-to-1 odds, but there's going to be a shift to the left because we're attacking out of a pinned hex. And we're not going to use our air for that, so it's going to be 5-to-1, becomes a 4-to-1. And the roll's a 6. Ouch. That kills him, I think. 6 and 4-to-1 will kill the... oh dear. So he's going to go to the play mat. Put him in the reserve box, and he gets flipped over. How do you flip him over? Okay, I don't know how to flip him over in Vassal, so what I'll do is put him up in the upper right-hand corner, I guess. All right, now, do I want to move over there? Yeah, I might want to do that. Just go ahead and advance like so, out of the pinned hex. Next, we're going to use the other two guys to attack the New Zealanders to the right there. We have a total of 14 factors against 4, so it's 3-to-1 odds, but there's a town there, which is a shift to the left. So that becomes a 2-to-1. We'll go ahead and use our air unit. So the air unit basically nullifies the defensive shift for the town, so it's 3-to-1 odds. And another 6. Aye. Takes a step loss and has to retreat 3 hexes. Unfortunately, he can't retreat 3 hexes. Oh my goodness. So he's going to, I believe, die, right? He's one of those 3-step guys, so he's going to take 1 step loss, and because he cannot... the odds, it was 3-to-1 on the German table. He rolled only a 6 would have done that. It was a DD result, says retreat 3 hexes. Each defending unit loses 1 step. The problem is he can't retreat into an Ezok, and because we advanced wisely on the last attack, I believe he dies. So, ouch. Off to the destroyed box with him. He's replaced by a detachment, but the detachment, is part of him, so he dies too. So you have 2 flipped over detachments out of that, and I've never seen the Germans start off quite this good, ever. Yeah, I think I'll do it like that. All right. Next attacks. Let's go ahead and do the attack on the left first. We're attacking the Welsh with the Fallschirmjägers here. And don't forget, this German detachment has black combat factors, so he can participate. So it's a total of 8 strength against 5, which is, I think, on the 2-to-3. Oh, there isn't one of those columns. Dang it. And the North African, I think there's a 3-to-2 and a 2-to-3 column. Okay, there isn't one here, so it's just going to be on the 1-to-1 column. It's counterblow attack, so the defensive shifts for Orchard and the box do not apply. Straight up 1-to-1. I'm not going to use... Well, I guess I will. I'll go ahead and use my Stuka for that. And here comes the die roll. It's 2. 2 on the 2-to-1 is a CC result. It's something unique to this game. What that means is you roll again on the CC column, way over on the right-hand side of the combat results table. So we use the CC column on the German table because he's the one that's attacking now. And 1 on the CC column is a CA, counterattack. Now, counterattack is not required. And since all we want to do is hold them, we'll just go ahead and stop there. So the counter blow, counter, and the air unit go away. And they've basically there was no effect. Okay, next attack is the engineers and their detachment, total of 7 strength factors against the Rangers there south of Kenya. So it's 2-to-1 odds. Shifted 1 to the left because of the orchard, and 1 to the right because we'll throw our last Stuka into that. So it's 2-to-1 odds, and a 3 on 2-to-1 odds is an exchange and counterattack required. So for the exchange, I will choose to eliminate the this guy here. And I'll have to put him on the play mat, and there's no way to really flip him over, so I'll put these flipped over guys way up on the, like, off to the side. Okay, and this guy loses a step in the exchange, and he is required to counterattack, and it's going to be 1 to 3 odds. Stuka goes away. 1 to 3 odds on the allied table now, and a 5 is CC. So now we use a CC column, which it's almost like the firefight table in Ardennes 44. So if you've ever played that game, that's kind of what it reminds me of. It's like these little firefights taking place. 3 on the allied CC column is counterattack required. Oh no. So here comes another attack. 5 to 2. Terrain is ignored now. It's still 2-to-1 odds. Rolls a 1, and it's a counter blow. So we should take our target marker, flip it over, and place it on the engineers. But I'm not going to bother with it because in just a moment, all of those markers are going to go away. Because now that all the attacks are done for the German side, we go ahead to the housekeeping phase. So I pressed the button on the toolbar, and it automatically removed all of the defensive tokens that are in the holding boxes and all the target markers, and it put them in the used box on the player mat for me. And that is basically turn 1 of Invasion of Crete. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is stop because I think we've amply covered the game. There's so much more that we weren't able to cover. I really didn't use a whole lot of my cards. I could have, but I got some nasty landings that are coming up in Heraklion. So let me go ahead and show you what's going to happen in Heraklion. We'll go ahead and start the second turn here, and then wrap things up. So ordinarily, after you've done all your housekeeping, that's when you go ahead and do your turn checks. And again, for turn 2, it's the same deal. We have an airdrop, and allies have limited movement. So we'll go ahead and move on to the new game turn, to adjust cards. And you do it in order of gameplay. For the first 9 turns of the game, the allies go first. Then on turn 10, the Germans go first. And you should be aware that between turns 9 and 10, the Germans will get a back-to-back move, and that can be huge. What we'll go ahead and do for the allies is we'll look at their hand, and they've already got one. They've got some good cards, but this one here is not terribly useful, so they'll discard 1, and they'll draw 2. And what they drew will be revealed in just a sec. Greek Bravery, which will help you in battles against Greeks, and Truck Battalion, which allows you to move guys long distances. You'll see that there is actually an Australian unit that's hovering on a movement arrow between the Rethminon sector and the Kania sector, way down over here. That's not a misplaced unit. He started there. And ordinarily, it'll take you an entire turn to move between maps. An entire day to move between maps, an entire turn to move from one arrow to another, and then from an arrow onto the map board. That Truck Battalion could get you scooting along really quick. For the Germans, what we got in our hand, I already showed you. They're all pretty good, and so I'm not going to do anything with them. I like their hand. I didn't use any of the cards last turn, but I didn't need them then. So I think it's too good just to dump them. So we'll go ahead and hold on to those and move into the strat phase. So the allies get to go first and pull out the allied card, we're going to go ahead and use scratch troops during the strategic phase. Put 2 allied detachments from the reserve box into any Kanea city hexes, or bring back to play on its reduced side any eliminated square unit into a hex not in an EZEC next to another unit of the same brigade. Shoot. Well, crap, that's not going to work. You got to read all the words on the text. Well, here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring that New Zealand boy back that had died up at Milani. I wanted to bring him back, but since it stipulates I can't put him in an EZOC, and I have to put him back to a unit of the same brigade, which is the number to the left of the hash mark. And these New Zealanders over here are of a different brigade, the 4th. So, well, that's a shame. Well, you never know what will happen. I might get a chance to use that later, so I'm not going to use it for the detachments just now. So put that back in my hand and chalk that up to not reading all the words. That's it. They're not going to play a card. For the Germans, they are going to play a card. They are going to play ammo shortage to abort up to 2 allied artillery markers, allied player's choice, to be available in 2 turns. But the allies desperately need that artillery, so they're going to use German snafu to cancel that card. So both cards are negated. So the German player goes back to the drawing board and decides, he's going to use Crete Student during the strat phase to pair drop from the reserve box 1 German round detachment to a hex within 2 hexes of a friendly unit. All right. Why I want to do this would make sense later on, but so I'll explain here in just a second. But during the nighttime, detachments, if they're in or adjacent to a hex that contains one of your understrength guys, you can sacrifice the detachment to bring the square piece back up to full strength. So I'm going to try to paradrop him here. And we got a dice for that. And I believe we do that right now, actually. I don't think we wait till the organizational phase. It's going to be a +1, -1, because he's within range of AA. And he rolls a 4, and according to the tables, that's going to park him right up there. So I'm going to have to use a counter blow or something to get him into position. And that's it for the strat phase for both of us. So we'll go to the organizational phase, where we get to get all of our goodies out of the used box. So starting with the allies, they get to pull out all their target markers and their used barrage and tanks, and then they assign them to different sectors. So again, we'll put the tanks in Kanea. We can't put a barrage in Kanea because there is no 2-strength box, hexagonal box unit in the Kanea sector. So we'll have to put one in Malimi. The sector starts with an R, Heraklion, and you can only do 1 per, so we'll have to put one in Galatas, even though there's no real need for it there. Okay, now it's during a night turn is when you would be able to sacrifice detachments in order to bring guys up to full strength. But we don't have that going on right now. You can also spend during this time. You can spend a couple cards from your hand in order to flip over detachments in your on your player mat. So as the allies, if I look at their hand, really isn't a need for it just yet. But later on, I might want to sacrifice a card in order to flip over one of my detachments and make it available again. Okay, let's go ahead and move over to the German side. As I said, my mic might not have been working for a moment there. But what I was saying was that during the organizational phase, during the night turns, that's when you can, after you've collected all your pieces and assigned them to sectors, then you can take your round detachments and sacrifice them to flip over under strength square units that are in or adjacent to their hex. You can discard a card from your hand in order to, actually you can do this I think during the daytime turns as well. You can discard a card from your hand in order to flip over detachments that have been placed on the player mat face down. The Allies don't need to do that just yet, but later on they probably will, and the Germans really don't need to do it yet either. So for the German organizational phase, it's going to be real simple. We're going to take all of our goodies out of the goodie box. And whoa, I think the housekeeping tool has a bug because it took all these tokens that shouldn't go there. They belong in the invasion convoy and the air landing box. So sorry about that. Okay, so we put a barrage marker in Canea. It's the only place it can go because that's where the engineer unit is. And we really don't want any movement in Malemi, nor, yeah, we don't want any movement in Malemi, and it might be worthwhile to interdict in Heraklion. And we are going to throw support into Malemi, and we're going to throw a bunch into Heraklion because I think those are the most dangerous areas this particular turn. Okay, and now the last thing we do during the organizational phase for the Germans is we put down our air landing guys that are coming down this turn, and then we'll reveal all the stuff hidden on those areas. Now, in the Rethymnon sector, there's an airfield in there, but there's also a port. That port might be vulnerable. I don't see a box terribly close to it. So I think I might have made a gross error in my setup, perhaps. So let's just see what happens if we do something like this and make a strong attack from that direction. And we'll see what happens here. Okay, and then over in the Heraklion sector, there's a lot of stuff over here. This sector can be just a stinking nightmare for the Germans. So we're just going to try to make the best of this. And hopefully something along these lines will work. I'm very cautious with my Fallschirmjägers. Germans were historically way more aggressive and they got shot to smithereens. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. Oh, there's a allied unit up in this box. He stays there until turn 5. And turn 5, then he gets to enter the map using a counterblow token. Okay, so let's go ahead and reveal all the goodies there, and then we'll wrap up this demo. So let's flip over the boxes in the Rethymnon sector. We have F and K. F has some Aussies near the airfield, and K has a host of Greeks all facing the wrong way. Yeah, I really didn't think about that backdoor approach when I set that up, so oops. Over in the Heraklion sector, got a bunch of them. We have I. Let's start with I. Just got one there, one there. D is real, and there is an Aussie battalion in there. E has a bunch of guys around. He's a tough nut to crack. And another thing you want to watch out for is sometimes it's tempting if you suspect the German's going to land deeper inland to place your guys deeper inland, but beware that around turn 4 there is a convoy that's going to attempt to make an amphibious landing, and I've seen it where the Germans will land amphibious against an unopposed port or airfield, and disaster then ensues. So beware of that. In L, there is a Greek up on the mountain there, and that was a dummy. There we go. So that's how the landings are shaken up there. Let's roll them out just for giggles and grins. Over in the Rethymnon sector, we'll do the square units, and we'll start with this guy that I just unflagged, and he's gonna be a -1. And that's a good thing because he rolled a 6, which becomes a 5. Whoops, wrong table. 5 will put him in one of these 3 hexes of all things. Well, that's good and bad. He's going to take a step loss because there's a Greek unit in one of the 3 units, but he'll be able to go there and he's going to capture port right off the get-go. Unbelievable. The other guy in that sector, the other square unit, is going to be a -1 as well. He rolls a 2 and will be right where he wants to be. Round units, we'll go to the guy on the right. He's going to be +1. And he becomes a 5 and lands right there. Other round guy is a -1 and a 2 will throw him off the map. Oh, I can't remember what happens to him. I think didn't he die or something? I'd have to look it up in the rulebook. I think he dies. So I'll just put him there while I wait. Maybe Carl can answer my question on him. Yeah, I didn't really think about that with the round guys, that they actually, yeah, he's going to die, that they actually can drift to the left. The prevailing wind is from the southwest going northeast, but sometimes they can drift unexpectedly. So it's not all peaches and cream there for the Germans in that sector. Okay, over in Heraklion, we'll start from right to left. The square unit is going to be just a straight up roll because he's within range of AA near the airfield. Go ahead and throw that box up there so you can see it. There's another box right there. All right, so +1, -1, and he lands right where he wanted to. Next guy to his left, a 3 is going to put him right up here, and he's going to be okay. He's going to be in one of those 3 hexes. He's going to be okay, and we will put him there to make Allied movement difficult. All right, the next square unit is going to be a +1 because he's adjacent. +1 again because he's within range of AA, so he's +2. A 5 is going to throw him way off course. He's going to go to one of these 3 hexes. We will throw him in the city here, in the town here. And the round unit is going to be a +1, -1. Straight up roll 6, though, throws him up here with this guy. So all things considered, that wasn't a disaster over in that sector. If anything, that turned out to be good because the Allies still can't use target markers this turn to get a good attack on the guys that landed further north than intended. And perhaps the Germans can gang up on the Greeks and hammer them and then be able to reinforce the battalion that's holding the kind of pinning the Allies closer to the coast. Crete is such an interesting scenario because as the Allies, you desperately want to hold on to the airfields, the ports, but your escape route is to the south. And that's where the enemy's coming from. So both sides want to eventually get to where the other one is. It's a very, very interesting military situation. And I think this game is one of the most fun experiences of playing this campaign. All right, we can go ahead and, oh, I have to unstack, sorry. Carl points out a rule error. I have to unstack the round unit stacked with the square unit. What happens? Does he drift to an adjacent hex? I can't remember the rule off the top of my head. While we're waiting, I'll just kind of wrap up the in summary, I think this is one of the most fun of the Crete games. Like I said, it's an interesting situation militarily because the Allies want to defend sites in the north, but their escape lies to the south. The Germans are landing in the south, but they want to get to the north, and it's just all around a very interesting, fluid situation. I guess I would throw that round guy. Carl says any adjacent hex will do, so heck, we'll throw him here. How about that? He's a detachment, so he doesn't have a Zoc, but hey, what are you going to do? Okay. And yeah, there you go. That just kind of gives you a flavor of the game. Early on, the Allies, they're not moving. There's not much they can do. Starting on turn 3, they can start moving, but night turns, there's no combat. You may not enter an enemy zone of control unless you have an event that allows you to do so. If you're in a zone of control, you can stay there. There are some cards that allow night attacks, but you need to get to an airfield because there is a whole host of units that you want to land. All these guys here can land once you've captured an airfield and there's no allies adjacent to it. Then your hand size is increased by 1. You can start landing these guys one at a time. That's what the number 1 next to the airfields means. You get the barrage counters, 2 barrage counters for each of the engineers that land in this way. I say each of them because there's an invasion convoy, but unless you capture a port and unless you attempt it at night, the odds are they're either going to be driven back or they could be destroyed altogether. If the Royal Navy's out there, there's several events that can impact the invasion convoy. And there's some neat little optional rules in C3I 27 that pertain to the invasion convoy. Adds a little more fog of war. And so there's some new engineers that will come in with that. If they die, any of the guys that die in the invasion convoy, it's not all over for them because they go into the destroyed box, but each night turn the German for free may take one of the square units out of the destroyed box and put it in the air landing box. In other words, they can kind of reorganize some scratch troops and land them at the airfields. That's why the airfields are just the huge thing. And as Carl points out there, it is the first sudden death victory goal that occurs in the game. If the Germans have not captured an airfield by turn 9, they can lose the game. I say can lose the game because if they control a port, then there's only a 50-50 chance that they'll lose the game. You make a die roll on a table. So you really need to grab an airfield as quickly as possible. But in this situation, it's looking pretty good for the the Germans to capture Malimi Airfield. That's looking pretty promising up there, actually. And during organizational phases, that's when you're going to do your invasion convoys. There's one more reserve wave of paratroopers that drop on turn 4 in the form of detachments from the reserve box. And again, those round detachments are how you take your understrength square units and bring them back up to full strength. During the organizational phase is also when you can make port-to-port movement as the Allies or evacuation movement as the Allies. So, and at some point, evacuation is probably something that's going to happen if you haven't won a sudden death victory. I think there's another sudden death victory on turn 15. I don't remember the conditions of it. Maybe Carl can fill us in on it. It's in the rules, obviously, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Possibility the game will end on turn 17 rather than 18. And again, all that stuff's clarified in the turn-by-turn events. I've got several Crete war games in my collection. I have both Advances games, the one from Avalon Hill, which the title escapes me, but it's the one that had Malta and Crete in it. I think it was just Invasion Crete, actually. And I have Operation Mercury from GMT Games, and of those, this one has the smallest tabletop footprint, and is probably the faster playing time between this and the Avalon Hill version. And I think it's just a fantastic game, and just can't wait for Carl to make a Malta game using this system, because I think that would just be awesome. Air Assault on Crete. It's sitting on my shelf behind me. I cannot remember the name of it. Operation Mercury is the bigger one by Vance. That one is huge. You need a really long table for it. It's not very wide, but it's very long, actually. So I have a 8-foot table, and I think it uses just about all 8 feet. Yeah, Liros is another fun landing game. There's actually a game on that from MMP. I can't remember the name of that one either now. Leros the Island Prize. That's what it is. It's from the TCS series, and it's kind of the same situation where it's a desperate fight between two pretty crack units. You know, one's already taken the island, the other one's landing by air and by sea, trying to take it back. And there's, you know, you don't have a whole lot of reinforcements for either side. It's just a big shooting match on an island. King of the Hill with World War II pieces. So, anyways, that is No Retreat, the Invasion of Crete. I hope I showed you the nuts and bolts here of the game system. Like I said, I think it's incorrectly billed as an intro game to the series because there's a lot happening in this one. I think you're probably better off learning the system by reading and playing the North African game and then coming back over to this one because there's a lot of changes between this one and the other one. Either that or we can get Carl maybe to make Crete its own rule book, because that would be a little bit. I think if it had its own rule book, then yeah, I would send beginners this direction. But otherwise, it's kind of hard to flip between the two sections to find certain other rules. And I'm really glad it fit in the box, Carl, because I confess I think I've been enjoying the Crete game more than the North Africa game, but mainly because I have not figured out how, as the German or the Italians rather, to win the first scenario from the North Africa game. If anyone can figure out how to win the first scenario as the Italians, let me know, because they get blown away every single time. So next time I'm playing North Africa, I'm going to start with the Sunflower scenario setup and work through the campaign from there. But anyways, I've got the other games on pre-order. There's GMT's got some other No Retreat goodness on pre-order. I think there's France on pre-order, and isn't there another one? Italy? Isn't Italy on pre-order too? I remember I pre-ordered 2 of them, but I think it's France and Italy. And France includes Poland. Nice. Very nice. Cool. Now, does Italy include Sicily, or is that something else we're going to have to wait? Oh, good. Yeah, it includes Sicily. Nice. Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed the demo. Looks like the demo went about an hour and a half. I'll have to do this in a couple parts on the upload. But we'll try to get this thing uploaded the next couple of weeks to YouTube. So if you missed part of it, you'll be able to go back over it a little bit later. Sorry for the confusion at the beginning. I always get confused with the setup because it kind of changes the sequence of play around. Once I get past turn 1, I get rolling in this one. And like I said, it's my favorite game so far in the box, probably because I'm partial to games on Crete. It's just such a fascinating situation. So anyways, thank you for coming out tonight, Carl. I really appreciate you coming out, especially to answer all my queries. And the historical setup, he says, for Crete will be available soon, which will be very nice. Thank you guys for coming out. Have a great evening.